Yeah, bloody how's it, man? Alright, first thing you want to do is get standard form. So, what I'm going to do is move these two terms over to the other side so that everything equals 0. Remember, when you move these things over, they become the opposite sign. So you can see I have a plus 10x now and a plus 21. So they always change signs when you move them over. Okay, now I've got to factorize. So I'm seeing a trinomial. So I want to get positive 10 with the factors of 21. 7 times 3 comes to mind. Okay, so if I say plus 3 plus 7, that will give me the plus 10 in the middle. So now I chuck those straight in my brackets, x plus 3, and then in my other bracket will be x plus 7. And then from there we jump straight to our solutions. We grab each little factor and make it equal to 0. So here you can see factor 1, it's just the contents of what's inside the bracket, and then x plus 7 will form factor 2. So I grab each little factor and make it equal to 0. So I say x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 7 equals 0. So once that's done, I work on each individual equation separately. So I'm going to take the plus 3 over, and it will become negative 3. So that's our first solution, x equals negative 3. And with the other solution, yeah, I just forgot to write the word or there, so I just wrote it in there. Take the 7 over, and you get minus 7. Alright, moving on swiftly to our second example, which entails the highest common factor. Also, you'll notice there's only two terms over here. So, first things first, get that standard form. You know the drill by now. So, I'm going to move the x over. The reason why I'm moving the x over is so that the number in front of x squared stays positive, which just makes your life quite a lot easier that way. Right, so I'm going to remove the highest common factor when I factorize. I see they both have an x, so I take an x out. And then don't remember that sneaky minus 1 at the end. If you take the whole thing out as a common factor, there's a 1 left over. And now we can equate each factor to 0. There's factor 1, just the x, and the 2x minus 1 is factor 2. So, grab the first one, make it equal 0, and there's my first solution. Then I grab the second one, make that equal to 0, and then I go ahead and solve for x. So I'm going to move the minus 1 over to the other side. And remember, when I move him over, he changes sign, so he's going to become a plus 1 now. So we've got 2x equals 1. And then I want to get rid of the 2 in front of x, so I divide both sides by 2. The 2's on the left hand side will cancel, and it leaves me with my second solution, x equals a half. And that's question 2 wrapped up. Alright, now question 3 will feature the difference of two squares, the dots. Alright, so gonna get that standard form. You know the drill by now. Move that 1 over, and I've officially got standard form. Now there's no b value over here, and we have two perfect squares being minused from one another. So this is officially dots. So I'm going to form my two brackets with the equal 0 at the end, and then I want to square root the stuff when I do dots. So I square root everything separately. Square root of 16 is 4. The square root of x squared is just x. The square and the root cancel one another out, and the square root of 1 is just 1, quite a special little guy. So I'm going to put the 4x's first because the 16x squared came first, so the same order must exist. And then with dots, you notoriously have your plus minus, and now I can scope out my two different factors. So I've got factor 1 over there and factor 2 over there. So I work with them separately. I grab the first one and make it equal to 0. And from there, I'm going to take the 1 over. So when I take it over, it becomes the opposite sign, turns into negative 1. And then to get x on its own, I'm going to have to divide both sides by 4. And then when I do that, the 4's cancel on the left hand side, and I get x equals minus a quarter. Now the story is going to be very similar for our second factor. The only difference here is the sign. So we're going to get basically the same answer, but it's going to be the opposite sign. So take the 1 over, it becomes positive 1, divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals a quarter as my second solution. Okay, now we're going to be jumping into the Quadratic Formula, bro. The Quadratic Formula. So, first things first, standard form. Always want to get that standard form. So I'm going to move the 13 over, and it will become minus 13. Now, I always want to try factorize if I can. It's much easier to factorize and solve rather than using the formula. So if I want to try get minus 1 with the factors of 13, 13 is a prime number. It only has 2 factors, 1 and 13. If I add or subtract those, I'll only get 11 or 14, so they're not working. So it's impossible to factorize this thing. So it forces me to use the formula. Now the formula should be given on your formula sheets. You shouldn't really be required to know it off by heart, so it should be given to you. Before I use the formula, I need to know my A, B, and C values. So I like to highlight them like this. It just makes subbing into the formula quite a lot easier. Right, so let's grab the quadratic formula. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, now I'm just going to literally chuck everything in. And you can see since I've highlighted a, b, and c, it's a lot easier to put them in. Now, I like to use brackets everywhere. Brackets are always helpful. You must just trust the process and always put brackets. It's also going to help you type it into your calculator. You literally type it into your calculator as you're writing it now. And that allows no room for mental math errors. So from there, we're going to go to the calculator and type that nonsense in. So make sure to press your fraction button first, and then you type it in exactly how you see it. You do the positive one first, or you can do the negative. Doesn't really matter. I like to do the positive one because it just feels a bit brighter than the negative one, doing it first. And you can see I've forgotten a negative on that 13 when I put it in. And then my answers give me some weird thing with R. So if you're getting R with your answers, something's going wrong. On most calculators, it'll return you math error. Now that you can see that I've changed it, it gives me the correct solutions. So 2,25. And I'll go get the other solution now just by changing that plus in front of the square root to a minus. And then just bear in mind, these questions always specify what format they want it in. So some questions will say to 2 decimal places, some questions will say third form. So you must sort of give your answer in the specified format. And that's the quadratic formula. Right, moving on to example 5. This is when we have to FOIL to get standard form. Now, you only FOIL when your bracket equals a number. If it equals 0, you go straight to your answers, which we will see in the next question. Right, so I'm going to initiate the foiling. First 2 is 3x, outer 2 is plus 12, inner 2 is minus x squared, and the last 2 is minus 4x. At the same time, we're going to bring that 8 over to make it negative 8, so that we can set ourselves up for standard form. Right, so I've got a couple of like terms to do here, the 3x and the minus 4x. 3 minus 4 is negative 1. So that will give me negative 1x. There's no need to write 1s, so it just turns into negative x. Now I'll shift my attention towards the numbers. 12 minus 8 gives me positive 4. Now I want to factorize, but I don't like factorizing if the number in front of x squared is negative. So I want to get rid of that thing quickly. So what that means is I divide everything by negative 1. Technically, I divide the 0 by -1 as well, but nothing happens to the 0, so we can kind of ignore it in this case. So everything sign changes. We get x squared plus x minus 4 equals 0. And now I'm going to try factorize if I can. Right, so I've got plus 1x in the middle. So I need to use the factors of 4 to hopefully get plus 1. So the factors of 4, I can say 2 times 2 to give me 4. But I can't add or subtract those to get me plus 1, so they're not working. Maybe 1 times 4. Let's see if those will work. I don't think so. That could either give me 3 or 5, or minus 3 or minus 5. So those aren't working. So if you can't factorize, you formula, always. Alright, so same process as before. Get the formula, and then I chuck all my nonsense in. Okay, let's just take a moment to go see what a, b, and c is. So if I look at a, there's no number in front of x squared, so it's a sneaky little 1. Same thing is happening with b, also a sneaky little 1. And then c is anything that doesn't have an x, which is the minus 4. So we're going to chuck all of that into our quadratic formula. And then once I substitute everything in, it just becomes a calculator problem from there. Now, if you have the white calculator, these can also solve them for you. If you press mode 5-3, it basically says mode equation, and then 3 is the quadratic equation. So once you press that, it asks you for a, b, and c. So if you type in the a, b, and c values, you press 1 equals, and then minus 4 equals. And then once you've typed in the a, b, and c values, you press equals again. The x1 and the x2 are your answers for x. So that's a bit of a shortcut with the white calculator only. Alright, so I'm using the template from my last one. Like, there's no need to retype the whole structure. I can just change the a, b, and c values here. And when I do the first one, I'd like to do the plus first, so that's why I changed that to a plus. So my first answer is 1,56. I'm just rounding off to 2 decimal places with all these examples. And then I just change that plus to a minus in front of the square root. And we get our second answer to be minus 2,56. Alright, welcome to a classic test trap. So when they give you something that's factorized and equals 0, it's a trap. They've dropped you off very late in the procedure. They factorized everything for you. They've done the hard work. So if you see something factorized and equals 0, you jump straight to your factors and your answers. So over here is factor 1. 3x minus 2, and over there is factor 2. I'm going to work with them separately. So I make the first one equal to 0, 3x minus 2 equals 0, and I'm going to take the minus 2 over. When I take the minus 2 over, it becomes positive 2. So now I have 3x equals positive 2, and then I divide both sides by 3 to get x by itself. When I divide both sides by 3, the 3's on the left hand side cancel, and I get x equals 2 over 3 as my first solution. Okay, directing my attention towards factor number 2, I'm going to grab it. Just make sure you have the word or in between your solutions. I'm going to grab it and make it equal to 0. So 5 plus 8x equals 0. I'm going to take that 5 over. When I take him over, he becomes the opposite sign. So over there, he was positive 5. So when I take him over, he's going to become negative 5. Now I need to get rid of the 8 in front of x. And I divide both sides by 8 to get that accomplished. The 8's cancel over there. And then I'm just left with x equals minus 5 over 8. Right, next up, they're just blowing a bit of smoke in your face with this bracket. So what you need to do is distribute the x so that we can start on our mission to get standard form. So I'm going to distribute the x at the same time. I'll move the 5 over so that it helps me get standard form a little bit quicker. X times x will give me x squared. 4 times x just gives me 4x. And if I take the 5 over, it becomes negative 5. Now I'm going to factorize these guys. Definitely got a trinomial on our hands. So I've got to use the factors of 5 to give me plus 4 that's in the middle. So if I use the factors of 5, it's a prime number, so it only has two factors. 1 times 5 will give me 5. So I need to use that to get positive 4. So if I say plus 5 minus 1, that will give me positive 4 like I have in the middle. From there, I can formulate my two brackets of x minus 1, x plus 5. Bear in mind the order of my brackets don't matter because the order of multiplication doesn't matter. 3 times 4 is 12 and 4 times 3 is 12. Right, now that that's out of the way, I just want to take a sec. With factorizing trinomials, you've got to make sure these two multiply to give you that one at the end, because sometimes it doesn't always work out that way and you've got to compensate for it. So just make sure if I multiply 5 and negative 1, it gives me that negative 5 that I originally had at the end of my trinomial. So from there, we can grab the contents of factor 1, make it equal to 0, and solve for x. So take that 5 over. Our first solution is x equals negative 5. And with the second one, grab the contents of the brackets, x minus 1 equals 0. Take the 1 over. Alright, welcome to your challenge round. So this is a literal equation. This is a quadratic equation that has more than one variable. And you're asked to solve for x in terms of p. So first things first, you want to get standard form. So you take everything over to that side and make it equal to 0. So I take the 2x over, take the minus p over, and then from there I want to extract my a, b, and c values. So a is 1, b is negative 2, and c is the thing without x, so c is just that lonely little p at the end. From here you cannot factorize, so you have to use the formula. Okay, so I'm going to chuck everything into the formula, and then I'm going to go on a fat mission to simplify all the contents of basically what I put into the formula. So I'm going to chuck b in over there, and just always use brackets. It does have a big impact if you don't use brackets. So brackets are always necessary when something has a negative. I also like to use it with positive things. It just makes your life easier and makes the working out easier. So now that I've chucked in a, b, and c, we are going to simplify everything. So if I look at the first part, a minus and a minus will give me a plus. So that minus and that minus give me a plus, so I get plus 2, and there's no need to write the plus. Inside the bracket, minus 2 squared, minus 2 times minus 2 is positive 4, so that just changes into a 4. With the other side there, that 1 won't affect anything, so 4, negative 4 times p gives me negative 4p, and then at the bottom, 2 times 1 will just give me 2. Right, so underneath the square roots, I'm seeing a common factor of 4. So this step over here is solely dedicated to removing that common factor of 4. So once I take the 4 out, I'm left with a 1 over there and a p over there. And then that's still over 2, nothing changed at the bottom. Now I've got to simplify that surd. So I'm going to do that on the side quickly. A law with surds is if you're multiplying two things under the surd, you can split that up into two separate surds or two separate square roots in this case. So I can have the square root of 4 multiplied by the square root of 1 minus p, and the square root of 4 is just 2. So I just change that to a 2. So that square root, I'm going to modify it to look like what I just did over there. So the square root will change to plus minus 2 root 1 minus p. Once that is accomplished, there is a common factor on top. There's a common factor of 2 on top, so I'm going to remove it. So once I remove that common factor of 2 from the top, there's just a 1 left over from the first term. and then plus minus that square root, because I removed the 2, so it's just the square root left over. And now that that 2 is outside, we can actually do the fun part of cancelling. So these 2's will cancel and make our lives a lot easier. Once those 2's cancel, we actually at the final answer. So x equals 1 plus minus the square root of 1 minus p. Right, second last example for the day features a perfect trinomial. Now, when you have a perfect trinomial, you are only going to get one solution for x. So we have a trinomial on our hands here. It's already in standard form, so we're going to factorize. So 3 times 3 will give me that 9 at the end, and I'm somehow going to add or subtract those to give me the plus 6 in the middle. So plus 3 will give me that plus 6 in the middle. And then I can just factorize straight from there. X plus 3, x plus 3. Now, notice how our factors are identical. So we only have to work with one of them. We don't have to do both, because then that's unnecessarily stating the same thing twice. So we only grab one of them and work with one of them if we see that they are identical. So I'm just going to grab the first factor, x plus 3 equals 0. Take the 3 over, and I have got my only solution for x, which is x equals negative 3. And then our last question for the day features no solutions for x. So you could possibly get no solutions, one solution, or two solutions. Most of the time you're going to get two solutions. So stock standard, standard form, boss. You want to move everything to one side, make it equal to 0. So move the negative 18 over and it becomes positive 18. And now I direct my attention towards factorizing the trinomial. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always worth trying. Okay, 1 and 18 won't add or subtract to give me negative 8. 2 and 9, they won't work either. That will give me 7 or 11. 3 and 6, that could possibly give me 9 or 6, or negative 9 or negative 6. So those all are not working. So if you can't factorize, you formula. So let's chuck everything into the formula. Before we do that, let's see what our A, B, and C value is. Our A value is a sneaky little weasel in front there. Sneaky little one. Our B value is that negative 8 chilling in front of x. And our C value is just that positive 18 at the end there. Alright, so let's chuck that into the formula. So negative 8 plus minus, and then we have the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So always use brackets. Now the reason this one will not give you any answers is because you're trying to square root a negative. So when you pop this into your calculator, it's going to give you a nasty little error message saying math error. And that's to be expected, because what's underneath the square root will be negative, which I'm going to illustrate in the next step. Negative 8 is positive 8 plus the square root of. Now, literally what's underneath that square root, I literally type that into my calculator and let my calculator work it out. He worked it out to be negative 8, and that will allow me not to make mental math errors. The more I rely on my calculator to do those small things or double check those small things, the more accurate my work becomes. Alright, so we're trying to square root a negative, which is impossible for now, so there's no solutions for x. So it's always better to write that down to show your teacher that you recognize that there's no solutions for x.